Next up, please help me welcome Matthew Gordon of Crux Investor, who will introduce and moderate the Energy Transition Metals panel.
That's a bit busy. Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to be talking about critical minerals and the importance, well, in the context of the energy transition. We've got a couple of uranium guys at the end there who will want to talk their book, I'm sure. But first, we're going to start with you, Ardy. Maybe kind of set this up, because it's a big topic.
Yeah. So thank you, Matthew. Being an engineer here, I like to have a framework and a structure. And obviously, critical minerals is a big thing these days. Everybody's talking about energy transition and critical minerals. But what is it that we really need to have an integrated, critical mineral, framework in Canada? A few things just to, set the tone for the stage is net zero. So mining is a crucial factor for achieving the net zero goals that we have. And while we're switching from fossil fuels to green energy and basically going to low carbon economy, there is a demand for mining of critical minerals. We're talking about copper, nickel, cobalt, lithium. And why do we need that? Because of everything that we use, from the smartphones that we carry, construction materials, you name it. We talked about that yesterday, today. Everyone is aware of the importance of the critical minerals. So in order to achieve that, we have to increase the amount of mining by 500% globally. What does that really mean? Like, if building a mine takes from the discovery to going into operation up to 25 years from the discovery of the deposit, what can we do to be self-sufficient and have a supply chain for critical minerals? So I can think of a few things. And if we start from the top, is junior mining companies, not exploration. That's really the key in order to feed all the major mining companies with those assets. And speaking of junior miners, we have them on the panel. We were just talking about it, about how do you deal with that? What's your biggest challenge? Is the capital and your access to capital for the investment. So that begs the question that where this money is coming from. If you look at CCI, Canadian Climate Institute, they're estimating an upward of $30 billion capital investment to get to that point that where we want to be in Canada. So that's really one of the key components of meeting that critical minerals demand in Canada. But what are the other factors? Another thing that I can think of is, do we have that critical mineral supply in Canada in order to meet the demand of the manufacturing? Can we have that, or we have to rely on import of critical minerals from other countries? We don't want to be there. We want to be self-sufficient. Mark was talking about processing all those critical metals to the point that we can use them in manufacturing. That will be another key component. We don't want to just dig that mineral resource or the mineral and import and export that to other countries for processing. We want to make sure that we have the entire life cycle of that process in Canada, going from exploration, exploitation, processing, and selling that in the market. Other benefits will be helping the local economy, helping the technology companies in terms of development of the technologies that we can do the processing. That's going to help the universities, research and development, and on top of that, the local communities that we're doing the mining. So these were the framework that I was thinking. I wanted to, open the floor. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts. Like I say, it's a big topic, and probably we won't do it justice in 30 minutes, I suspect. And I'm going to probably start at the far end, because these are the guys who've got to find the stuff which you engineers will help them get out of the ground efficiently. And then, for Chris, obviously, hopefully funding some of these things at some point as well. But maybe, Ed, I'm going to come to you. You've kind of got a broad spectrum of knowledge, and you can put some of this into context in the sense of how is Canada approaching this? It seems like we've been mining a long time, but it still seems like a relatively new idea, critical minerals lists, and how can Canada be self-sufficient? Well, so the question is, can it?
It's interesting, and we've in the makeup of this panel, we find it interesting because I'm focused on nuclear, which is a critical mineral, but completely different than I would say than the rest of the execution of the battery minerals and other critical minerals. Yet in the energy transition, nuclear is a very important part of what we do, and as Canada, it's one of our strategic assets that we have, and I think we really need to focus more on. So I am really in the ideal spot between the two. I think Canada has been very good at highlighting about what our challenges are and making big, beautiful, glossy statements about our problems, and we don't have a lot of solutions. And I don't think we need to be an expert at everything. I don't think we need to own 100% of the supply chain from the ground to the ground, so to say. And a lot of the policies that we put out there as a government have been misdirected in the sense that we tend to react to what the Americans are doing. We need to put out big battery plants because the Americans are going to get them all if we don't spend $10 billion ourselves to do that. And there hasn't been a lot of planning into how do we get the steps and how do we build a roadmap on going from A to B, as opposed to, oh geez, we need B, what can we do? And then reacting instead of actually planning. And I think I don't want to be the one to continually be a non-believer in what the government is doing, because we have great programs in place that are accomplishing some of the goals. Though I think we can plan it better from a road mapping standpoint.
Okay, well let's talk about some of the problems that the juniors face, and there are many obstacles to face. I mean, we'll maybe start with you. You're a prospect generator exploration guy, Jon. What are the obstacles that are put in front of you that perhaps you think could be, let's call it, refined or removed?
Yeah, great question, Matt. So as a junior exploration company, our company Standard Uranium, we are in Saskatchewan. We have 13 projects. Multiple projects are project generators, so we find other companies to spend their own money on our projects. And the biggest obstacle we face is capital. How do we get the capital to do the exploration work? And it's a constant battle. In 2023, the uranium market really heated up, and we saw spot price go from $60 to $110, and money was flying in. And then we got to 2024, and it reversed, 110 down to 60. And now in 2025, it's been pretty flat, around $70 or $72 a pound right now, but we're seeing some great momentum in the market right now. When that market heats up, money starts to get coming back into the market, and we can start to get that capital and start to explore. So junior exploration companies like Atha and Standard, we rely on capital to come in to get the exploration work done so that mines can be built on the basis of exploration. So it's always sourcing capital, and we need to, more help from the government or others to find ways to get more capital to juniors. Right,
but and Chris will sort of come on and talk about the top end of that one, but risk is always involved, and there's been some pretty badly run companies, some loss of value for retail shareholders, etc. So there's different appetite for capital allocation to juniors at the moment. I mean, you're coming out of slightly more advanced, slightly more de-risked situation, but for you, Troy, what do you think? Access to capital?
I think it's coming. Okay, it's more than we're talking about critical minerals here, energy transition, etc. But I think we've also started to shift almost past that too, and talking about energy security, right? Energy security, national security, these things are tied together. For the first time in probably 30 years in North America, we're actually seeing baseload energy demands increasing and projected to substantially increase. Our rate limiting factor to growth in Canada and in the US is our energy infrastructure. And it's a timely conversation because right now we're at a position where people are starting, nuclear is forefront to that discussion and that conversation, and going to be at the forefront of the build out of the hyperscaler systems, of the data centers, of the AI infrastructure in the US. And this is a long way, Matt, of getting around to the question of capital. That's an exceptionally compelling investment opportunity. And for what was a pretty niche market, the amount of capital that gets attracted into, the junior exploration sector is a small segment of the capital pool, but as that opportunity continues to expand and grow with the fundamentals of the nuclear energy space, people are looking to how do we de-risk this? How do we de-risk the supply chain? What are the opportunities? What are the investment opportunities as the price of uranium continues to move up? Capital flows into the space and it flows into the sector. And we're starting to see that again now, which is absolutely required because it's a space that's been beat up over the last 15 years, 20 years. And as a function of that, we just don't have the assets, don't have the deposits in the pipeline to meet future demand. And that's true across the critical mineral space in general. And so I think we're starting to see a rotation of capital into the commodities.
Right, and Chris, better get you involved with this one. You're PSP, part of the Canadian Growth Fund. What's the remit, what's the brief in terms of the critical minerals contacts that we're talking about today?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the discussion here is spot on in terms of the key points that Canada is facing in growing critical minerals. And a couple of the panelists mentioned capital. Canada Growth Fund is a very powerful tool that is ramping up on the critical mineral side to be a source of capital to help to unlock and capitalize on Canada's abundance of natural resources. It's a fund where it's managed by PSP. It's a federal-backed fund with allocations to deploy capital into both clean tech, decarbonization, but what we're here today to talk about is the low-carbon supply chain and critical minerals investing. And a lot of what we've been working on ramping up and will continue to ramp up, and some people have seen some of the recent investments that we've made, are to find ways where capital can be impactful in accelerating the growth of critical minerals, accelerating projects to FID, to production, getting projects built in this environment where, as everyone's talked about, it's more important than ever to have these critical minerals extracted and flow through the supply chain.
Okay.
Sorry, I think there are two conversations we have to have, and as an investment conference, we're all here to try to make money, and from a supply demand in the future, uranium, buy all the uranium stocks you can because the supply demand fundamentals are unbelievable, and I'm not here to advocate for uranium. But in what you're doing, you're facilitating projects that can't get funded otherwise, and your mandate isn't to make the highest return possible on the equity or debt or however you put the funds in. It's more to facilitate projects that are not getting there, like the loans program office at the DOE, similar type mandate. So you're just hoping to get your money back and recycle it again, and not necessarily make a 10 times return, which is really necessary. But going back to my comments on the supply chain, they're not all economic. Like doing rare earth minerals, it's a really necessary thing for strategic importance, but you're not going to make money doing it, or it's hard to make money doing it because the economics are very challenging, and the final end market is maybe not there, and the feedstocks are maybe not there to go into it. So it's a really it's a very complicated puzzle to put together and try to get capital formation to happen when all of these moving parts are out there, and you don't even know what in 10 years from now, what will the battery chemistry be? Do we need cobalt in the world anymore? Probably for some applications, but how do you build a mine that's going to be built, commissioned 15 years from now, and hope that you have a market for your product that may not be there? It's really a challenging conversation.
I'm interested in your point that you made earlier, Ed. Why should the Canadian government try to solve for all the problem, have an end-to-end solution for everything? Because someone's got to finance that, and that's going to be the taxpayers of Canada, surely.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. We have people from different, spectrums in this panel. But what we see in the industry is everybody is working in their own silos. Junior miners are working in their own silos. Investors are, trying to invest their money and deploy the money somewhere that they can get the return. And we come into the picture as the engineers who can work out the asset in a way that you look at the financials as investor. For example, Chris, if you want to invest in a mine, what do? You look at the IRR, NPV, and then you want to get the return for your money in the fastest time frame. You look at the payback period, and then you make a decision whether you want to invest in that asset or not. So there has to be a collaboration across, engineer service providers, miners, financiers, everybody working together to get that asset from the ground to production in the fastest time frame possible. That's how we see it, and we have to have that platform to collaborate together to get to that point.
So I'd like to build on a point that Ed raised with respect to where the risk lies in financing projects and where the risk lies in building mines in uncertain times, in uncertain commodity environments. And it's a really good question. And part of the mandate of the Canada Growth Fund, and one of the things that we get really excited about, is the ability to take risks beyond where the public markets may take risk. Like a lot of the mandate is to catalyze private investment by, in some cases, expanding the pool, in some cases, creating consortiums, and in other cases, creating structuring solutions that may expand the ability of that project to get financed or take risk a step beyond where the market sees it in order to catalyze growth, catalyze that private investment. And so it's a really good point you raised about the space and about and it really becomes a question of risk. And while you're right, there's financial soundness in every investment that we make, and we need to evaluate those merits. Part of our mandate is the impact that we're making. And can that impact accelerate projects? Can that impact achieve other goals for the benefit of Canada, for the benefit of bringing jobs in Canada, for the benefit of accelerating growth and energy transition in Canada, while still meeting a financial soundness test? And so it's a really good point you raise, and in some ways is what gets us so excited about the mandate at PSP to implement the Canada Growth Fund is, the mandate really does allow us to tackle a bit of that. It's going to take us and others working together with the private sector, with partners, with investors alongside us as we advance there. But it's a challenge that we hope to help solve in the Canadian mining industry.
I think it represents a tremendous opportunity for Canada. We have a large endowment of critical minerals, uranium, across the spectrum. Okay, and we have a skilled technical workforce. We have skilled explorers. Canadians across the space are miners and explorers, and we do a very good job and have done a very good job historically. The conversation now is getting to the point where there's starting to become a broader realization and understanding that it is, critical minerals. 10 years ago, we just called those base metals, right? It is the stuff that underpins our economy and supports our economy. And we're good at it, and we have a high endowment. And what we're seeing within supply-demand curves across the spectrum is that incentive pricing is coming within the commodity space that is going to incent capital back into the sector, that is going to lead to exploration, going to lead to discovery and development of assets. So on a look-forward basis, tremendous opportunity for Canada, tremendous opportunity for junior explorers, right up the value chain, engineering firms, financiers, etc. I'm very optimistic, Matt.
But if I may say, because this is a question of whether you believe in, isolationism, as in, we will, protectionism, we will look after ourselves, we'll stand alone, or you say there's an inevitable globalism required to be able to, deliver this kind of critical minerals list, or pseudo-globalism needed. We are going to need international partners, because I don't think Canada can solve for its own problems, and certainly not finance it.
Mm-hmm. Matt, let me jump in there
Jon,
for a sec.
Please.
I mean, we are very blessed, as Troy mentioned, to have incredible endowments in Canada. Saskatchewan has got the best uranium endowments in the world, the highest grade by far. And just to our south, we have the U.S., who have got massive, the world's largest nuclear fleet right now, and their new minister, Chris Wright, just said they want to triple or quadruple that in the next 20 to 30 years. But they don't have the endowments we have in Canada. So they're producing about 1 million pounds right now a year. They want to get that up over the next number of years. Maybe they get to 25 million pounds, maybe they get to 50 million pounds, but they want to get something 5 times, 10 times that. And Canada has got the opportunity to move quick, to make the discoveries on our projects in Canada. And the U.S., Mr. Trump is, he's a lot of things, but he will need to get those minerals from Canada to build out the U.S. nuclear fleet. So we've got a great opportunity to fund that, get those discoveries happening, get those mines built, and have a great partner in the U.S.
But isn't that about trying to capture more of the value in country? That's what Canada needs to do, mm-hmm. and then sell into receptive, friendly markets like the U.S. So how do we do that? I mean, Ed, what do you think?
That's part of this puzzle or the roadmap that I see missing. It's in the midstream. We're actually really good at mining, not so great at permitting mining, but we have lots of endowments. And don't get me wrong, I'm the most optimistic person in the world. Like, I love where I am, and I'm focused on energy transition because there's such an opportunity, and I see it as such a complex challenge to look at all of the aspects of how to get a project built. And I'm focused on nuclear in particular because it is, the financing matters, the regulatory matters, but then there's, the community engagement side of things, there's the policy side of things, and in their case particularly, the enrichment side of things generally is a challenge as well. So there's a lot of midstream processing stuff that we have to address, and we tend to not talk about the fact that, well, we were happy in the last 50 years to let China take all of the midstream processing and do it themselves because we didn't want to use the power, we didn't want to pollute our nation, and we were happy to let them do it. And all of a sudden now, with changing governments south of us, it's become an issue that we don't, they're the new enemy of the world, so to say. Anyway, enemy of the U.S., they're not our enemy, and I think we should, if we wanted to deploy solar, it's great. I would rather buy panels from and modules from China at the cheapest price and put them on roofs rather than try to shore an industry in our own right, because there's no point. So that's what I was saying. We need to choose where are we good, what are we good at doing, what are we endowed with, and how do we take the 31 strategic minerals that the government pointed out and say, well, we don't need to be able to do all of them, but we should be doing some really well, and how do we own that whole supply chain from beginning to end? And I don't think it has to be across the board.
And Chris, I mean, your fund, you've kind of got a remit, you know what you're meant to be getting after. Do you see that sort of evolving and changing over time? Is it, we've got to buy Canadian, we've got to support Canadian? Is that what it's going to be going forward for you?
The focus of the Canada Growth Fund is very much investing in Canada.
It's not making money, it's about supporting Canada.
It's about supporting Canada while making having financial soundness in investments.
Right.
The goal ultimately is to recycle capital and have the capital accelerate growth in Canada through that. So there has to be a financial soundness. We are independently arm's length of the federal government and make our own investment decisions accordingly. But a very key part of our measurement are impacts on Canada. And how can we stimulate growth? And I go back to a comment I made at the beginning of how can we really capitalize on the abundance of natural resources that Canada has and do it in a financial way to accelerate growth, attract in other investment alongside our investment, work within financial structures that can help to unlock projects where there may be capital providers ready to provide part of the capex to build that project in a structure they're comfortable with. And there's just one part of that capital stack that just a company's been trying to solve. Ideally, those are situations where we're trying to work and find ways we can solve that.
Right. Who do you partner with on these sorts of things to make sure that these guys get the money that they need to build these things out so this guy can do his engineering?
In terms of partners, in terms of, when I say partners, I mean like investors that we may invest alongside. It's the private sector. Okay. It's, we certainly want to invest alongside high quality partners, but the key really is just stimulating additional investment.
Right. And are you the lead? Are you the cornerstone usually in those sorts of relationships, or would you follow behind?
In most situations where we find ourselves, we're additive investors.
Right.
We can help to work with companies and help to really accelerate that. And in some ways, even having a secondary investor can help you almost as a leader. If you know there's an investor that's there, if you just kind of have that cornerstone, you can be an accelerator.
Yeah.
We view ourselves as a really unique tool to the Canadian ecosystem of helping to accelerate investment, accelerate capital, because everyone on the stage has seen projects of that discussion where you talk to a independent financier, talk to a private sector investor, and like, well, if you've got every other dollar there, I'll be the last dollar in. And in some ways, we're going to be part of that solution too. That's part of that group. But ideally, we can help companies get a bit closer to that last dollar in, so that in the raises that we do, in the ways that we can fund, you can look at, okay, people have the confidence that there's now a partner there that's a pretty deep funding partner.
Right.
That can help to provide that project support.
So it's a kind of financial and it's a kind of political animal, really.
Yeah, we look at projects from a perspective of impact. We look at projects from a perspective of like readiness to advance, from financial soundness and a number of other factors.
Right, okay.
Once your dollars are allocated, though, does the governance prevent you from actually having influence over the business at that point? Or here's the money, do what you should with it, but then do you actually have any actual influence and ability to affect management?
Yeah, we're an arm's length private investor. It's public, the type of rights agreements that we have with investments that we've done, and we look to partner with businesses, and we look to work with those businesses, continue to support those businesses, and this is across the spectrum of the Canada Growth Fund, not just in our low carbon supply chain vertical, but also the work we do on decarbonization projects and the work we do on Canadian clean technology investing.
Ardy, can I come to you? Having listened to this conversation, are you filled with hope about the ability to grow your company? It seems like a lot of barriers for some of the employers, some of the clients that you may have further down the line. Is this all going to come together for you?
That's a great question. So, I think there's a need for streamlining all these processes because, we talked about permitting. If it takes a long time to permit a mine, what can we do to streamline that process, that we permit a mine in a time frame that is, beneficial for Crux as an investor and for the miners to get their project off the ground, and for other players like us who's going to be involved in developing and building those assets. So we don't want to fast track or expedite, because at the same time, we want to make sure that we have highest standards for permitting. We make sure that we work with the local communities and indigenous group to ensure that they are protected as part of this process, but at the same time we can fast track building a mine. You know what I mean? We want to make sure that that process is there, and we definitely need support from the government to be a part of this. We want to make sure that they are on board and they support miners, investors, companies like us to all work together to get to that goal.
And are you seeing actions, not words, out there? Politicians are great at talking.
You see, I heard some positive comments, and this is what we see. There is the will, and it's something in the works. So it's not as fast as we would like to see, but there is a push to get things off the ground much faster and quicker.
Ed, are you hopeful?
I'm hopeful, and then I'm going back to what you said originally. Atkins is in a really fantastic spot as far as this all goes from an investor standpoint, and your stock has done well. They happen to be the one of the top nuclear developers as well with the CANDU program, and they've done really well. And their nuclear services, they're building the BWX, and they're part of the integrated plan there. So you win in any scenario because you're so vast and you have such a good influence over what's going on. You're going to participate in whatever it is, if it's mining and in supply chain and in any aspect of it. So that's great, and I'm optimistic because I hope that we will find the signal through the noise. There's been a lot of noise every day. We wake up and say, "Oh my God, what's happening today?" This morning the tariffs went up on steel and aluminum to 50%, and how does that affect the demand for it's hard to figure it out, and whether it will stay for a week, it's hard to figure out. But I'm optimistic in the sense that it's only 4 years, and we'll get through it, and there will be sanity through the signal through the noise at some point.
And I'm going to go back to the beginning of the food chain. That's you, Jon.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about all this?
Well, I am hearing some great things today in this panel. Number one, as you mentioned, engineering firms could be a great strategic partner for junior exploration companies. If they're looking for work down the road, come in, be a strategic partner, put some financing into junior exploration, and the Canada Fund as well. I'm not sure how far down the food chain you're going, but there's great opportunities to look at those projects that could use some government funding as well to move that along. I'm excited. We've got great projects. The global demand for nuclear and uranium is massive, and it only continues to grow, and capital is flowing back into the uranium space. We've got a great team, as does Troy at Atha, and we know capital is going to find us, and we're going to have a bright future.
Great. Gentlemen, appreciate the time. Like I said, not enough time to cover all the topics, but some super commentary here. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.